Hi everyone, my name's Declan McGlynn. Welcome to Friday Forum Live, Point Blank's weekly broadcast, bringing you exclusive tutorials, artist interviews and industry insight every Friday live from East London. Today we're taking a look at DIY mastering and getting your tracks and works in progress to sound as loud, tight and crisp as possible for your DJ sets and downloads. Okay, so let's have a look at the kind of premise behind today's session. Essentially, we've had some producers in here who've talked about testing their tracks out in the club, and I'm sure you've heard that before, how important it is to hear the mix, see the crowd reaction, assess the arrangement and that kind of thing, but you don't want to pay for a mastering engineer to master the track because it might not be finished, it might not be mixed yet, the arrangement might change. So you tend to do a quick, dirty master to just get it loud enough, get it a bit brighter, and so it'll sit along the other tracks. So this isn't going to be a session about the science of mastering, about mastering for different release formats and that kind of thing. It's more about using cheap or free plugins to basically get your track as loud as it needs to be, for you to take it out, put it on SoundCloud, maybe it's a free download, play it in your sets so it'll match all the other tracks you're going to play as well. So we've got JC who's with us. He's the head of school here at Point Blank. How you doing,
Thanks.
man?
I'm very good, thanks.
Good, good. Yeah, good. Friday.
Great. So yeah, we've got a mix here, and like you've said, it's got some of the issue that you're going to find.
Yeah, I think we got a track that maybe
homemade.
has, it's about, the mix is okay, it's about 80% there, not loud enough, a little bit muddy, the kind of cliches that you'd get from a bit of an amateur, producer who doesn't have the right room or the right speakers. So we thought it was a good example that you guys might be able to relate to some of the problems in this mix.
Yeah, so let's have a quick listen to a few key moments of the track. So that's the track, that's the intro, the long intro. So usually when you're going to master, obviously here,
Yeah.
so I'm going to flick through it briefly just to get a feel for it. That's the first breakdown.
So yeah, it's a bit cloudy.
Maybe a bit cloudy, the bass a little bit, could be some couple of resonances in the bass and stuff. But like you've said, I think we're not going full mastering session where we're not going to go into that kind of slightly more detailed EQ, surgical EQ. I think what we're going to look at today is kind of big issues that you should be looking out for when you're going to be mastering for clubs, especially if you play live with an audience. You want to make sure that it sounds okay. If you put it on SoundCloud, you want to make sure that it still represents your work in a good light.
Yeah, exactly.
And hopefully we'll demystify some few issues as well in the process.
Yeah, so like if you have I think if you had like a remix competition or you wanted to sign for that, but you didn't want to pay to get it mastered, it's those kind of things.
And also, for me, since I've been getting into mastering, and I don't consider myself as a mastering engineer. I'm more the sound engineer, producer, mix engineer. And I've gone into mastering more and more lately because we have to do it ourselves more and more in many, until you reach that level. And it's a question we get a lot from students. Shall I send it to mastering now? Is it the right time to do it? And it's all those kind of elements. So, but what for me, been involved with mastering more and more lately, it's really had changed the way I mix.
Right.
And I think that's what I'm trying to, on this session that we're doing today, is kind of like, look, if you do those little things at the mastering, it almost helps you to self-assess and evaluate your mix as well in a way. So you listen to it, and obviously it's not like you're mastering somebody else's track where you need to get familiar and identify the problem. It's your own mix.
Yeah.
So what I really want to emphasize is at any time you could go back, if you find that you've got a massive issue that you can't deal with, go back to your mix and fix it,
Sure. I guess a lot of the time when you're mastering your own music as well, you tend to, because you know the creative process up until that point, you're not as, you're a bit too close to it.
Totally, which is why I would advise leave some days.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Leave some days, finish your mix, leave a couple of days, leave a few days, come back and do your own mastering. I think you'll suddenly have a lot more perspective on it.
Yeah, and master from a bounced file, not from the mix itself.
Yeah,
so
I see a lot of issue, and more and more people, I've noticed it, we're running some mastering courses at the moment, and a lot of students were saying to us, well, since that you can master from stem, why wouldn't you do it? And it's that continuous commitment, if you master from stem, first of all, and your own material, it's kind of like, that means you're not really confident about the balance that you have, and you should be. When you mix, it's about committing. Also, if you send that to a mastering engineer, from my experience, the more stem you send them, they don't like it. And on top of it, you may not like it because they may start changing your balance. And that balance that you've carefully crafted and worked on, the guy's coming, doesn't have those considerations, changes it, and you could not like it and actually quite hate it. You kind of, what happened here? So I'm quite against the whole stem mastering personally, because but it's a personal opinion.
Sure.
But for me, it's about this commitment. You know, you should be confident that kind of like that's my mix, that's what it is, and
yeah, sure thing.
And you move on. You know.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the first step.
Couple of things that we look at. This track here. First thing I'm going to look is where it's peaking, to see a bit what kind of headroom I have. Okay, so there's not much headroom, but that's an opportunity that I would want to, first myth that we would like to, or confusion that I would like to get rid of. A lot of people are saying, oh, you need 6 dB headroom for mastering if you send it to a mastering engineer. I think there's a confusion between headroom and dynamic range.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The headroom really doesn't matter. If it's a mastering engineer in a studio, he's going into analog, therefore there's a gain stage input that is going to change anyway. And if it's in the box, here it's a bit too loud. So as soon as I'm going to start boosting EQ, boosting some frequency, some range, I'm probably going to peak. But all I have to do is put a gain plugin before, turn it down. So this whole idea of like, oh, you should always leave 6 dB headroom or 3, or I hear lots of different theory about it, is absolutely nonsense in my opinion. Dynamic range, however, is very different. It's between the lowest level and the highest peak. And obviously that means if you put a heavy limiting already before mastering, this dynamic range is going to be quite reduced. But if we talk about dynamic range, then I think you're talking more than 6 dB of dynamic range, hopefully. 6 dB of dynamic range is already not much once it's mastered. So if that's all you have, before mastering, you're a bit stuck really.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Kind of like it's already been squashed far too much. So, pardon me. So the first thing I'm going to do is probably, because of that, put a gain. A couple of things I wanted to bring up. The idea today is to do as many as possible free plugins. So there won't be, I'm bringing a couple of like Brainworks and Waves, more to compare than actually, this is what I'm using. You know, again, I want to demystify this kind of like, what is the best of 2EQ. Play with it and what sounds the best at that time on that particular track, really. And so you'll be impressed by how some of those free plugins sound pretty amazing in my opinion. Sure. So first thing, couple of gains. So normally I would use the Logic 1, and simple, I'm turning it on by about 4.8. That gives myself enough headroom. I've got 3. If I need more, I can turn it down. But I want to introduce that one as well. The Brainworks Control. I think it's only, $130 or something? I can't remember.
I think it might be, $129.
Yeah, I see that very much as what would be the console of a mastering engineer. You know, you've got detailed pans and things like that.
Mid-side.
A bit of mid-side. So you can listen to the side only. You can solo the side. Obviously, I need to
switch down. Yeah.
Good enough. So here you can listen to the side, only the stereo information, and the mono one. So it's going to gain input. So I've turned it down by 5 dB here to give myself enough to go on. There's a couple of things I want to draw the attention I love about this plugin. The stereo width, and you can activate here. I'm decided to put just a tiny bit on this to bring that. It's quite common to do that. A lot of mastering engineers tend to do that, especially with mixing that have been done in the box by maybe slightly less experienced mix engineers. And another reason is that one of the common problems I think that mastering engineer acknowledge is often mixes from home on slightly smaller speakers, too much bass, too much kick. You kind of compensate, people tend to compensate because they don't hear it, because the speaker hasn't the size, replicate it, so they tend to overdo it on them to hear it. Therefore, you end up with a bit too much of that. So a lot of mastering engineers tend to turn 1 dB of the middle. One great plugin for that is Center from Wave. Really easy to do. Turn 1 dB in the middle, simple as that.
So this is kind of doing the opposites, bringing up the sides.
Exactly, that's what it does. So when you do that, you've got to be aware, because often in dance music you may have lots of synth percussion, maybe some of the hats, shakers on the side. If you do it too much, they're going to be effectively louder. So bear that in mind. If you're starting to go into width, really listen to what's going on the side. It's the side that are getting affected. I could demonstrate very quickly. See all the stuff, the organ is panned, brings it up. So what you want to achieve here is, if you feel that it needs a bit of width, do it until it starts affecting too much your balances, your kind of internal balance in the mix. First thing to be aware. Another one that I absolutely love is the mono maker, elliptical EQ, coming from the vinyl idea of basically you make a certain below, here you choose a frequency, 178 in that case, for example, and everything below that is mono. I think for clubs it's vital to have there's at least the sub bass and the low end of the bass spectrum mono, I think. Partly because wherever you are in the room, you'll have the same bottom end. It makes it sound tighter as well. Stereo basses, with modulation going from one speaker to another, you're losing the power. Dance music is driven by the kick and the bass often. You want that to be as steady as possible. So Mono Maker is great. I've listened to this track. I think it's already been done. It sounds to me that the low end of the bass is already been monoed. So I didn't feel the need to do it. But otherwise, that's another step that you should really consider, I think. I won't do it here. It's got also nice metering, as you can see here. And you see you've got this dynamic range kind of, so you see the dynamic range of the, so I love those speakers. You've got the peaks, the RME, you've got your balance, your correlation, which is for the phase. That gives you an idea if your left and right are a bit unbalanced as well. And here you've got those dynamic range metering, which basically tells you the dynamic range of the roughly. Again, gives you a nice idea. So if you have to go to invest for one kind of cheap metering plugin, kind of mono maker, stereo width, for the price, I think it's a great value. It's a proper, and it works in MS mode as well. Yeah. So I think it's it's the one thing that I think I would go for me. It's like I said, this kind of console type. So once I've got that, typically in mastering, if the mix is well balanced and stuff, all you're gonna have to do really to bring it up, I'm not talking full mastering where we're going in detail here, but what you're gonna need is a bit of top end to bring up that highs and makes it more exciting. Make sure the bottom end is tight enough, not overwhelming and sloppy. And the mid is nice and crisp, but not too aggressive, and high mids. And if you've got that sorted on the basic DIY mastering a little bit, you should be okay to play it in clubs and stuff. So I'm going to introduce the first plugin, EQ, which is a free one. I'm a big fan of this one. Several reasons. Fixed bands. I love fixed band when they're well chosen, they're really musical. That is a replica of the hardware, which was NTQ3, I believe. Don't quote me exactly, but I think it's a famous EQ used by many sound engineers, partly because it has this band, the air band, some people call it air band, but it goes up to 40K, way above what we hear. And a lot of people say, if it's above your frequency range, what does it do? Well, it opens up without you realizing it. It opens up. You don't hear exactly, but it really opens up that kind of stuff. That's the free plugin. So, and I think for the price, it's really quite amazing.
The price being zero.
Absolutely.
That's the best price.
That's the best price, So guys, get in there. There's a Brainworks, while Plugin Alliance have done a version of that called the MAG EQ,
the MAG, yeah.
which is as well. Whether one or the other, which one is best, the other, I'm not even going to go there. I've only played with it a few hours. I can't really, it wouldn't be fair.
But for free, I mean.
But for free, I'm really well impressed. Yeah. Well impressed. And have you noticed those fixed bands? You've got 10 hertz, 40 hertz. Again, often out of the range, but they do something, that kind of poshness. So there's two positioning on that one. There's several options that you can that they've done. They're quite nice. You can keep the gain. When you applied or cut. You've got an analog mode. I've put it in there because I compared it and I kind of preferred what it did. I can't tell you why, it just felt better for me. And you've got a mastering mode. The mastering modes, suddenly all those, you see here I can go 0.10 of a dB. In mastering mode, what they've done, and although mastering you could argue that you need to be more precise, what they've gone is a kind of a dented, old school, because often all mastering EQ hardware are dented. Otherwise, it's impossible to read and recall. So they're all dented and often more expensive. If you look at massive EQ, massive passive, for example, the mastering EQ is dented, stuff like that. So I've used that just because, again, for today I thought, you know what, let's be a bit rude and gross. Let's not go into the 0.3 point, 1 dB at a time, bing, 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 bing. Let's see what it does. So that's the first EQ I've done. So I've brought loads of 40K, just because I wanted to see what it does. To be fair, I think those two bands and maybe the 10 can work on this track. But it was a bit dull, so it really needed that top end. So 20K, it brings down a little bit, you hear it more, I think it's more effective.
Yeah, the hats come out,
But maybe it comes out too much, you could argue. So
yeah, I think it does.
You know, maybe it does come up too much. So the 40K worked for me. The 2.1 really works well. For me, the 2.5, straight away gives you that. That would be maybe a bit too much. To be seen. I think there's room for it. Then here, I felt there was a bit of resonance. You hear those resonance?
It's very pokey at that.
A bit pokey. So taking it down by 1 dB. Same here.
Yeah. So would you recommend maybe taking a band, boosting it a lot to see where it is, and then bring it back? Or
exactly.
So you can just hear.
And you're going to hear with a fixed EQ like that. Have you noticed as well? Draw your attention to it's 160, 640. They're all working at the octaves.
Right.
So they've been quite carefully chosen. The octave above would be 320. And this one is 2 octaves above 640. So they've been quite picked up quite carefully. I think those regions are usually regions that you need to either pick up on to bring up if it's not there, or often to especially around 150, it's a nasty frequency, often in mastering, the resonance in there. And you've noticed it as soon as I was pressing it, the bass and the kick were kind of matching. And I've brought a bit of 40 hertz because the bass is quite subby, but I felt that around 80, 60, you had a certain level, and at 40 it needed a bit to be brought up. Typically on a mastering at home, if you've got anything you've got under 30, you may want to control that a little bit more. So you may put a high pass. Again, I've checked on this mix, it was already done, so I didn't feel the need to do it. You know, don't do it systematically because you've read it's got to be done. You're going to see it on you would see it on the metering anyway. If we look at this EQ here, for example, you see it's been clearly addressed already, so didn't feel the need to do it really.
So would you recommend doing EQ first?
Okay, so in the chain, there's a lot of different thoughts. It's something I've picked up on with working with mastering engineer lately that I've seen at work. They tend to EQ first because it's about getting that tonal balance and then hitting the compressor afterwards. So often they prefer to send into the compressor something which is already well balanced, therefore the compressor is going to react better. Typically if you've got too much kick.
Yeah, so
that's what's going to trigger.
Not pulling up any frequencies you don't actually want to be there. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's more, whereas in mixing, often you may put a compressor first just because you glue it together, and it may already sort out some stuff within the sound, but here with program mix, I think an EQ first often. I've seen many mastering engineers do that. Occasionally, if the track is really all over the place in terms of dynamic and you're struggling to EQ a little bit just because there are a lot of big peaks in places, you may have to put a compressor before to be able to handle that. So I won't make it a general rule, but from what I've seen many times, in mastering guys, they seem to be doing that more.
Okay, cool.
Getting into the balance. So here I've done the branch stroke, and I would call that the kind of, compare it to a hi-fi control. Okay. Your bottom end, your top end, and already have a listen. Let me put that.
Yeah, it's that 2.5 and that 40K that are helping that a lot.
Totally, and I think the little cut here as well are helping to smooth out a little bit. And you see, I'm not going into detail, but straight away, I think if you do that kind of really basic stuff, you'll get you'll be in a better place in clubs and SoundCloud and anywhere else. So after that, I've done a little bit of surgery EQ. So here we're going slightly off what we said we wouldn't do, but we felt that it needed a bit of that. So let me illustrate. I'm going to cut those two bands again using the Logic One free plugins. The new Logic 10 has got on top of it mid and side, so it's brilliant. You can now do mid side with the and I have to say it's if you want that kind of transparent EQ, it's cool, especially for cutting, digitally. Yeah. I've got no problem with Logic EQ. So here I had another one at 140. Boxiness of the kick here.
That's nasty.
So that I think it helps. And then here, nearly an octave above, bit of resonance here. I'm going more detailed here. I'm starting to kind of draw down some of the resonance here. So we could go there. And then another one here at 360.
Bit of a whistle, yeah.
Bit of a whistle here. Do no harm to take it. So when you do cuts, try not to go too radically. When you cut, you tend to. It depends which kind of bends we want it to affect. Here, I didn't want to go with a wide cue because as a branch stroke, because I didn't feel it was this whole area that needed to be addressed. It was only particular.
Yeah.
So if it's those particular, you're more going into notch mode. And really kind of like a very narrow cue.
Yeah, so just bring a notch up, sweep through, try and find any ringing.
Any ringing,
out, yeah.
And don't do it, obviously, there's a danger of overdoing because as soon as you boost, you're going to hear ringing. There's going to be ringing everywhere. So bear in mind, turn everything flat again, and it's kind of like, are those ringing here and being a bit of a problem? And then only do the one that you really need. You don't want to start cutting everything out and you may overdo it, so be aware.
And all of this will really benefit you later when you start to bring the volume up.
Absolutely.
Because you're not pulling up those ringings anymore, yeah.
Exactly. So address the essential ones. I've addressed another one here as well, about 10K basically. You can see there's a big peak here. So I felt, just to bring it up again, that in a real mastering situation, I probably would address it with some kind of DSR as well.
Okay.
So it starts to behave as a kind of a dynamic EQ in a way. Just when it's placed, that's quite effective. That kind of slight light de-hacing, if you like.
So maybe we could move the track back to a different section just to...
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting a bit sick of that.
Yeah. So straight away, I think we're already in a better place if you compare.
Yeah.
One note I wanted to show you as well, what I tend to do is I tend to have the track I'm working on here and then the unmastered version next. Instead of doing solo and stuff, it's much quicker to go from there. So you might say, you see here, there's a thickness here. There's a certain thickness in the organ, which I think we've addressed. In the EQ, and I think it helps.
Yeah. I think that one is slightly louder though, is it?
Yeah, it is because we haven't done a gain on it.
Okay, cool.
Remember, I've done a gain on it here to give myself headroom.
Yeah.
So once we're going to start putting compressor and limiter and stuff.
Yeah.
That's why this one is louder.
Just as a tip, make sure that if you are A-being,
keep at the same level.
The same level, yeah. Otherwise,
so I did turn it by 5, so I could do 5 on the fader here, and that should give us something similar.
Yeah, it's cloudier for sure. Yeah.
It's not cloudier, and you notice it's not so much the top end. It's also this kind of little space we've done in the low mid, where it was a bit thick, a bit just too thick. Don't overdo it on bringing up boosting. Be careful of that. Address little thickness by removing a dB there, a dB and a half there. That's going to help as well. Suddenly opening up the top end. So straight away we've addressed those. I may as well introduce another free EQ. A company. What's the name of the company? You would know.
It's called Tokyo Dawn.
Tokyo Dawn. Yeah. I think that it's a record company as well, but they're also a bunch of coders, and they do 2 great plugins. One of them, unfortunately, crashes a lot with Maverick. Great on Mountain Lion, and it's one of the best transparent free compressor I've heard for a very long time.
And that one's called the TDR Feedback Compressor 2. Yeah. If anybody wants to Google that.
Amazing. Really try it out.
It is, yeah.
It's got a high pass filter at the side chain, therefore you can bring it up, the kick doesn't trigger the compressor. It's got a release for peak and RMS. So really targeted for mastering. Really cool. Bring it at the end.
Yeah.
And if the session crashes, then, well,
Yeah,
that's that.
it definitely will.
It's on it constantly. That's
Yeah.
why I've taken it out.
But we'll have a look at it later.
Absolutely. Here, this model, it's a great little EQ. It's got a lot of different models. You see Soviet, American, British, German. From what I've read on the manual, the German is slightly more transparent, less character, more for mastering, if you want that kind of transparency. I felt the track needed a little bit of bite in the middle as well. Just, it could work anyway. Let's have a listen.
That's the, yeah.
I think on that one we're going to hear better with the beats. Yeah, subtle, but I like what it does.
It is subtle, it's got that kind of, it's got more of a bite there for sure.
Exactly, it helps a little bit the claps,
Yeah.
I think. So, and as you've noticed what I've done with the EQ overall, it's quite simple, a little bit of top end there, the high end. So the boost that I've done, I've been on the low end, and it can be anywhere. Usually you're going to do 60 or 80. That's your hi-fi system. Mm-hmm. A little cut in the 600, the 300, 200 regions, those nasty areas, boosted at about 1.5, 2.5, and 20, or 40 in that case. It's that kind of like your hi-fi. It could be that you try on another with another type of EQ when you're going to boost 16, and maybe 4K instead of 2.5, but that's the kind of spirit. Those 4 points, I think, are quite key frequencies for your mastering.
Yeah.
So that's the first stage. Shall I carry on, or do you want to see if
Yeah,
we got any questions?
we've got quite a lot of questions, so we don't want to get too bogged down in questions at this point, but let me see. Someone's asking, is it crucial to make sub mono? I know it's been answered by some of the other comments, but...
Only depends on the material, but I would advise it. It just keeps it a bit more central and tighter. I mean, the sub is the one that really triggers the most energy. So that they're the one that in clubs, you may not hear that at home. For example, on those 4-inch speaker, you're not going to hear all that sub. You feel it, but you're not going to hear it. I tend to use headphones for that at home. I've got those. I don't want to...
Sennheisers.
Yeah, Sennheiser's HD 650. I'm not endorsing anything. I just felt that, having tried several, for the price, they're really accurate and they're pretty cool. So I check the bass with that, really. So well worth investment if you've got small speakers, having speakers, headphones that you can hear, that kind of stuff that you can't hear. So yeah, any other question?
There's a lot of discussion about which DAW is better, which is always really
one?
productive.
Which one? Which one is better?
Which software is better, yeah, which DAW is better.
There's no such thing as better software.
There you go, done. Let's keep moving.
Can you, yeah, once and for all.
No one's ever going to mention that again now.
Yeah. Okay.
So on to the everyone's favorite bit, compression and loudness.
Absolutely. Compression at mastering. Most of the time now, I think this track I felt has been already compressed on the bus. I think. It feels to me. It feels quite nice. It doesn't feel like all over the place where I need heavy compression to bring it together. Usually compression, it's about gluing things together a little bit or taming the peaks. Two different ways of the two big examples. I didn't feel it needed a lot, but again, I've downloaded this free plugin and it's called Molot, and the company is
Vlad G Sound.
Okay.
So
you've got two versions of it.
Boy.
You've got an English version or the Russian version.
If you want to go in blind, if you speak Russian, of course.
Absolutely. So that is kind of a really full of character compression.
Okay.
More like the third child type of vibe.
Yeah.
Again, sounds amazingly and surprisingly really good, in my opinion. I really loved it. We are doing very little with it on this track. It's got a limiter as well. It's got a mid scoop that I'm not a big fan of, so I'm not gonna, let's not even go there. Here it's got different modes, stereo, 2 mono, the mid, the side, so it's MS as well, so great. It's got an upsampling, I'm keeping it at +4. It's got your usual, and then threshold, release, ratio, a knee. And it's got a sidechain filter as well here. So you see, if you want the compressor not to react to the kick, you can put it slightly above. Great, I think it's a great feature as well. So let's see what it does. Oh yes, it's got this interesting concept of sigma and alpha. it's related to the attack time. I believe I've read the manual very briefly. Sigma is really fast response.
It's quite snappy.
Yeah, really snappy. And Alpha is a bit slower. I went with a bit slower, but with a relatively still fast attack here. I wanted to get the peaks a little bit under control still. But as you're going to see, what I'm done with the compression is very subtle. You see, just a tiny bit of reduction. I mean, when you master compression, you tend not to really, you don't go too heavy on it. We could bring the threshold, see what it does. No, but this is squashing it, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's got a vibe, this compressor.
Definitely.
It's really musical.
Do you think in the same way that you brought the bands up in volume to see what that EQ band was doing, is it a good idea to bring the threshold way down to see your attack and release times, make sure they're correct? Yeah.
Completely. Because then you hear if you've got those kind of pumping and
then you can bring it back up.
Absolutely. Yeah. You may not see it properly on the keyboard, but the numbers are there. The values, they're kind of hard to read. I've gone with a surprisingly high ratio because normally in mastering 1.1, 2.1, very quite subtle. But this one I felt it was working, and always bypass.
Yeah.
It's subtle.
Subtle, but I think it's working, yeah.
It's working.
Rounder.
It's rounder, a bit warmer.
All those cliches.
Yeah, exactly. So a great find, this one as well. All those plugins have been advised to me by the mastering engineer, Doug, was teaching here.
Yeah.
And they're great. I've been really. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy using them and download them and start playing with them, really. And now on the final bit, limiting.
Yes.
Loudness.
Loudness.
Okay, we've talked about loudness. Let's not go there. We've got special discussion on that. We can discuss it more on blogs and all that kind of stuff. The reality is that you've got to compete with what's out there in the real world, in clubs and stuff. So you're going to have to have a bit of loudness. Yeah. That's the reality of it. Clubs are heavily limited, so I feel that there's a balance where you get it loud as you can, but without squashing ridiculously the whole thing, because if you start squashing it, there's a danger that you're really going to hear in clubs, the limiting in clubs act as well, and then you could be in trouble. You
mean the limiter in the sound system itself?
Yeah. I've seen extreme cases where the breakdown were actually sounding nearly louder than the pick of the full-on track.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when it's really bad limiting. You know what I mean? So be aware of that. But yes, I mean, use a reference for track to get that kind of level going. I use several things for that purpose. I'm another paying plugin, this one, but I really like. I find it really easy to read for some reason, the Dorometer from Waves, and you see your average here and your peaks, and it just makes nice reading. So I tend to use that a lot. For reference, there's another plugin which is a paying one, which you should really consider, is the Sample Magic. I've become a big fan of this plugin. Mm-hmm. You basically can load up to 9 songs in there. Here's the player, so you browse it here. I would imagine you need to click to load a track. Yeah, here you are. So you load a track, you can have 9 of them, so you play it here, each track, you activate, you can not at the same time, clearly. And here you've got a simple A and B. So any audio loaded in there is B, and that's your own mix. So you can very, very quickly, again, and obviously I've got nothing playing in B at the moment. Again, the beauty of it is this plugin's got a dynamic range again. So I love those dynamic range. More and more metering now are coming with your dynamic range. At the moment, it's got a very healthy dynamic range, as you can see. 12 dB.
Not for long.
That's not for long, unfortunately.
Let's squish that bad boy.
Okay. This is an interesting one. This plugin is done by...
It's done by...
the same company who's done
Vlad G, yeah, the same
guys.
yeah.
Now, one really good practice, good good practice for getting loudness is try to do it in stages. So the first thing I'm going to show you, I'm not going to use that one first, but I'm going to bring that one. I'm going to bring our old friend and trusted L2. And don't get me wrong, I love L2 because I love the simplicity of it. I'm going to put a ceiling at 0.1 right now. If we've got time, we'll talk about that. And I'm going to bring it down. I mean, the idea of doing it together here is great because you can really judge. You hear it's completely destroyed here. The bass is really suffering. Still.
Sounds all right.
It's about okay here. So let's see in terms of level where we are. Okay, so now obviously so by to the standout, it's loud, but not that loud. It's not that loud. And the problem is I can't really push it more because the bass is straight away going.
Yeah, it's already starting to break.
It's already starting to break. So the idea is if you go by stages a little bit, and clearly if you guys have lots of different tools, I mean, whether you use Ozone, Isotope, which is really good, or T-Rax, which actually is quite good as well, or separate individual plugins, you know, multi-band compressor is going to help because you're keeping that in control, you're incrementing a little bit, a bit of that here, a bit of that here, and you're gaining your level by stages. Now, this free plugin, what they've done is exactly that concept. It may be a little bit harder to use, but if you focus on each section, consider them separately, and it's actually quite easy to use. It has a compressor here, which I've used in normal mode again. So, as you can see here, a bit of compression. Oh. So I'm gaining here a little bit. And then I've got a normal peak limiter, a broad one, and which you can use in brick wall, in soft, MS, multiband. That's your typical peak limiter, and that's going to be your mid-ball. So again, I'm adding a little bit here. It's got a gain and a threshold. Different type is the speed here. So yeah, so try it out. So I'm gaining a little bit here more. See, starting to gain. Actually, let's take them all off, and that way we can see. Here it's got an HF limiter, which is interesting. Think of it a little bit as a DSer almost, except that you can't really choose the frequency at that stage. I believe it's around 11K. And I needed that kind of like slight tips now that I've done all that kind of stuff. So perfect. And you see, so I'm getting that, and then it's got a clipper. A clipper in the world of mastering with hardware. It's when you overload the input of a converter on purpose. Usually you do a dB or two. So another way to gain extra. You know, in that race, I'm not saying they're good practices. You know, clipper is introduce distortion a little bit. A lot of mastering engineers are saying, I don't like it. They may have to do it because if the client wants loudness, you know. But I'm not even, like I said, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
I'm adding stages of level, yeah? That's basically that. So I'm adding a little bit with the clipper here. And again, it's got mid-side, multi-band. So it's a great little tool. Notice how it does straight away?
Yeah.
Gives you that slight saturation, but I quite like it in a way. Sometimes it works.
Definitely helps
dance
kick.
music.
Yeah, it helps to kick a lot. Yeah.
The kicks, exactly. And then here's your protection. And here I've gone digital clip, so to make sure that I'm not going over a certain fixed amount, which you set here. I've set it at 0.3. And here we are. So have a listen now.
Quite a big difference.
It's a big difference, yeah. But if we were to, let's compare it maybe a quick shootout of.
It sounds great though.
That's the free plugin, and that's the L2. On this track,
On this track, yeah.
on this track, the L2 is not as good as the free plugin, in my opinion. You could argue that maybe it needs more careful EQ before going into it. You know, what I love about the L2 is that it really tells you if there's a problem still in your mix a little bit. And I think there's still some issues here that haven't been addressed. But we're talking DIY mastering. And I think with what we have here, you can go out, play it in a club, play it on SoundCloud. You're there, it's not bad. Let's look at the metering here. So yeah.
Cool. So
That's pretty much that. I mean, in terms of levels, certain things you want to watch as well. If you're too hot, let's say 0.1 and really hot, constantly hot, well, there's a phenomenon based on the Gibbs phenomenon and all those kind of stuff. After that, if you start changing sampling rate afterwards or turn it into an MP3, you will clip. It's all to do with interpolating samples and all those things.
So even if you're not clipping in your DAW, and then you bounce it as a WAV, convert it to MP3, you might clip.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what you might want to do, and I'm not sure I've got it here, and I don't have it here because it's a 32-bit plugin, not a 64. SSL's got a plugin called Exism.
Exism, yeah.
Exism. It shows
It's free
you
as
that.
well?
It's free. It's
Okay.
another free plugin. Another company, a Russian company, who do all those, the 1073 and the Major Tom compressor. I always forget the name. Stillwell Audio. They do one as well, which also give you the bit depth of it as well. So it's pretty cool. So that's pretty much that. Do we have time for question at all?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, I
we've
think
gone
so.
a little bit longer, so I'm aware that.
Yeah, we'll squeeze some in, but maybe it's worth turning them off and turning them on one by one, just so we can hear the stages.
Absolutely. Okay, so we started with the gain. There's only turning it down, but there was, you know, the reason why.
Yeah.
Don't worry about keeping it at the word because you're gaining back into the limiting anyway, so it's okay. So first thing we did was this, and that straight away is that.
Yeah.
I think if you only had that, straight away it works better. It's playable outside.
Yeah.
I'm not talking finished mastering. I'm talking something you can play outside. That you're not going to be like, oh my god, you know. Then a bit more EQ here, addressing more kind of slight, small resonance. And then another one to bring a bit of bite in the 1K. And then compression, which I think has helped the kick and the mids a little bit, slightly less harsh. And finally the limiting.
Hey.
Which is the most obvious one, obviously.
Yeah. It's quite a big difference, though.
It is a big difference now.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you know, what I tend to do after that is what you could do is, let's put back that here. And what I'm going to do here is bring it down to kind of match. So I'm aiming to get at the same levels. This one really sounds boxy, it's got a lot of resonance.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, always compare at the same level, always. Otherwise
Yeah.
you can't tell. Everything that sounds louder, always for a few seconds seems to be better, which is not the case.
Cool, so let me have a look at, see if there's any questions. If you do have questions, now's the time.
Is the time, otherwise I'll try to go in there and answer
we'll try and get
as
them
it goes
later.
along. But if you have any question, guys, yes, please, a couple of minutes and then...
So yeah, Overby has asked, how do you correctly set crossovers for bands when you're using a multi-band compressor?
There's no rule in the sense that target instruments. I would target instruments, really target instruments.
Think of maybe 4 key elements of the mix and focus on those,
Yeah, well, maybe it's the bass, it's the sub bass, maybe it's the bass, the kick, the snare, those elements. I really focus on that and keep one as a DSO almost in the top end.
But you can solo band, so just sweep through.
Yeah. And also, I personally, because I'm not a big fan of multi-band, partly because I'm not sure I know what I'm doing with it, or I don't know why, but I'm not... For me, like I said, single band, wide band, I like it because it tells me more about where I'm at, if my EQ is my tonal balance is all right. I feel that with a multi-band you cheat a little bit, it's kind of a dynamic EQ slash compressor slash whatever else. But don't hesitate to maybe use only, you don't have to use all the bands of a multi-band compressor.
Yeah, you can turn some on.
Often
Yeah.
I mute some, and I may only address a couple of them.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Pedro Suarez has asked, I think I know the answer to this already, but is it possible to just use Ableton Live 9 Suite to do the same thing? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not talking mastering an album here where you've got other consideration to take on.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, Logic is no more adequate than Ableton or anything else for mastering. A real mastering suite has certain characteristics and features that are inherent to that. So
Yeah, sure.
You use Ableton, whatever.
Yeah, and obviously these plugins are AU VST, so
Yeah, and most of them are 64 bits, so it's
yeah,
brilliant.
stick them in.
Yeah.
So Lee Riley has asked, how do you avoid overcompression? I guess we're talking about hitting it too high with bass. It's going to trigger everything early.
But also, really compare at the same level as well, again. And if in doubt, do less. If your mix doesn't require compression and you're just doing compression to get a bit of glue and a little bit of level, effectively, as a first stage to gain loudness, aim to get your metering, gain reduction metering, not to go over 2 dBs. Then you can't really do too much damage.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find some more questions within the conversations.
A lot of people discussing.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yes, Dr. Unf.
Hello.
Let's just say that's what it's called. Is there a considerable difference to learn and use and learn these plugins? Doesn't Logic and Ableton have native EQ as well? I guess, yeah. It's not, there isn't much of a learning curve to those 3 plugins, really. I mean,
well, especially those ones. I mean, if you look at those ones, for me, it's, if anything, they're simpler.
Fixed band is...
They're simpler, People get... Again, you're getting to the stage, guys, where, when you start understanding, it's more important to understand the concept and the tools after that. I never used that limiter until yesterday, except that now I know how to use any of those together. So just I went carefully, read the manual, went through every stages, and you're there.
So yeah, one more question then, because we are running out of time.
Yeah.
Lee Riley again, bit of a vague one, but it might be a good one to end on. Asks, I'm only producing for over a year. What should I focus on?
Production.
Done. See you next week.
No, but yeah, you know what I mean? Really,
yeah, I mean,
you're
mix,
programming, choosing the sounds. Too many people are kind of like, I'll fix it at the mix. And then other people have this really, you don't fix anything at the mastering. You only do it because somebody has sent you a mix and it's quite bad. It's got a lot of issues and you've got to solve it. So you're solving as much as you can, but it's called a compromise. It's not.
Sure.
It's not doing a good job. It's a compromise.
Yeah.
You would be impressed when people choose the right sound. Everything is bang on. The groove is right. The programming is right. You just push the fader and it sounds already great. It mixes itself. And all you do with the mixes is be more creative and stuff like that.
Put your sonic stamp on it.
Yeah, exactly. So really, if you only focus at them and don't worry too much about mixing and mastering at that stage, but use simple techniques because I know people here are always kind of like, oh, I've done my track, but it doesn't sound like a record yet. And it's kind of like, well, I don't know anybody who's learned to make great record in a year. So take your time. It's going to it takes time to become good at what you do,
Sure.
Is it the 15,000 hours?
Really?
Theory, the 10,000 hours?
I didn't know.
There's a theory. I think it's 10,000 hours to get good at anything you want to do, whether it's being a dentist or well, I don't know.
So yeah, amazing, perfect. We're just about out of time now, so there's another question just came in.
Okay.
Last minute. I'll get this one in very quickly. Oh, there's loads coming in.
Oh.
Is it necessary to use more than one EQ to address all problems and to enhance what's needed?
Often, yeah.
Quick fire.
Yes,
Keep
often, yes.
Yes, no answers. This isn't a yes, no question. What are some good multi-band compressors?
The Logic one is decent. I quite like the linear phased waves, I've got to say, because it's got a weird function. What a weird function. It's got like a maximum ratio that you can achieve.
Yeah.
So if you set it to there, no matter how far you bring your threshold down, it will never exceed the limiting, if you like, if you say 6 dB, you can bring your threshold completely down. It will never compress more than 6 dB. So there's something that I quite like about this multi-band. I get on with it. But I think it's about, with multi-band, learn it until you become comfortable with it.
Yeah, there's actually quite a good question that relates to what we were talking about earlier. Where did it go? Jab Johnson says, he makes trap and hip hop and always loses the hard deepness in the bass when he compresses and uses a limiter. Do you have any suggestions on how he could solve that problem?
Well, it was the bass originally. It's inherent compression. That's what it does, because bass is what affect limiters. First thing they go for is bass. You know, that's the nature of it.
So how can you keep as much ramness and bass as possible while compressing? Roll it off more than you think, maybe?
Roll it off more than you think. Also use compressor maybe with that kind of filter.
Right.
You know, with that kind of
Side
filters.
chain.
For example, most of those compressors, like this one here quickly, it's got a filter here.
Yeah.
So basically that means anything below, I'm at 120, anything below 120 is not compressed here in the case of that track. So try that. The thing with hip hop is, again, you need that kind of deep bass, but maybe there was too much to start with. I think people tend to want more bass than it's needed. Mm-hmm. And it's only when you start playing it in cars, in other systems, in clubs, that you realize there is too much bass. So bear that in mind. But otherwise, try those things. Use a multi-band limiter in that case as well, where you can get the low end not affected as much.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so there's lots of stuff coming in. We just don't have time, unfortunately. No. We'll jump back into the comments.
Absolutely.
After this broadcast
I
is
will
finished.
as well. Hit us with some question. Declan and I will both, I'm sure, try to address them all.
Okay, nice one. Thanks, JC.
No, thanks, Declan. Thanks
so yeah, as always, hopefully you learned a lot from that session. We'll be back next Friday for another Friday Forum Live. Make sure you stay tuned to our Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to get more free tutorials and live events. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.